Hello everybody. So I've been making my way through the Arrowverse, and today I'm going to be talking about Arrow Season 3 and Flash Season 1. So because I'm going to be talking about both of those today, I'll leave time codes on the bottom, like chapter markers, so that way you can know when I'm talking about, Arrow, when I'm talking about Flash, what I'm talking about, so that way, if you've seen Flash but haven't seen Arrow, you can just watch the Flash part or just watch the Arrow part, and then it's also may end up being a longer video, so that'll help, you to just see what you want to see me talk about. But without further ado, let's get into talking about Arrow and Flash. The way I'm going to structure this video is first I'm going to talk about the crossover episodes, then I'm going to go into Flash Season 1, and then I'm going to talk about Arrow Season 3. So first, let's get into the crossover, and I thought that they did a very good job as kind of the first crossover of the Arrowverse. I know it gets a lot bigger and crazier, larger scope, larger stakes, more characters, more shows being brought into the mix, but this was cool as kind of the first crossover episode of the Arrowverse. I think they did a good job. I think that the villains and the overall kind of like storyline of the crossover episodes wasn't the greatest. Of course, again, it is the first one, so I feel like it was much more about Arrow and Flash than it was like the overall story, the overall villains. I think that we had the guy who would turn characters' eyes red and make them like overly emotional, which I thought that was an interesting way to have like the Flash versus Arrow thing, even though like you could have that in a way that makes sense. So I thought that was cool, but I don't think that was very interesting. The same thing with like the boomerang guy. I don't think that was insanely interesting. I do like the boomerang jokes that they made throughout it. Some of the boomerang jokes were hit or miss, but they were all pretty good. I mean, who doesn't like a good boomerang joke? I mean, come on. But like I said earlier, it's very much focused more on Arrow and Flash helping each other. How each of them can help one another be a better hero. Arrow helps Flash learn how to use his speed efficiently, and Flash helps Arrow realize that he is more than just the Arrow. He is still Oliver Queen, and so I think that goes more even to Oliver's arc in his season, in Season 3, so I think that, I thought that was very interesting. I think that was, again, like, more of, like, the focus, what I found more interesting about the crossover than the overall plot, but overall, I did enjoy the crossover. I think it was really cool, and I had a weird sense of nostalgia seeing Arrow in the crossover, because I took like a week to watch the first episodes of Flash, like in between watching Arrow and then the crossover, I had to watch the Flash episode, so it was a weird sense of nostalgia to see Arrow back when he shows up in Flash, so I don't know, I'm sure it was just kind of just like the way they just kind of set it up. It's just kind of like a triumphant thing, so, and also, I think that I enjoyed, Arrow more in the crossover than his entire season. I think that the Season 3 wasn't the best. I have problems with it, I'll get to that later, so I think that I very much enjoyed Arrow a bit more in the crossover. But yeah, I think the crossover was very good. I think it was a good starting point for the crossovers that, starting to introduce crossovers to the Arrowverse. They did a good job, good job showing how both Arrow and Flash both have some knowledge that they could share with each other, so I thought that was very good. But now, let's get into the Flash Season 1. And so I think that the Flash obviously can do, I think, a bit more cooler stuff than Arrow can, because, inherently when you have, metahumans and people with super speed and time travel and alternate dimensions and timelines and all this stuff, that's inherently cooler than, you know, guys shooting a bow and arrow. I mean, not that that's not cool, but, you know, there's a lot more of just, like, this kind of epic, crazy, like, mind-bending stuff that they could do, and obviously they only scratched the surface in Season 1 of like, what I heard happens later, so, you know, I think that's very cool. You know, it inherently can do much cooler stuff than Arrow can. So I think that's why I liked Season 1 of Flash better than Arrow Season 3, because, you know, it just can do a lot of cooler stuff. It's also more lighthearted, you know, with the jokes, and doesn't take itself too seriously. Not that Arrow takes itself too seriously all the time, but, like, I think that The Flash was able to kind of, you know, use kind of the campiness to its advantage, to make jokes about it, to have Cisco naming all the villains, and I thought that was, you know, that was kind of funny, the jokes that they made throughout. I thought they worked well. I think that using the particle accelerator accident to kind of, you know, justify having all these metahumans suddenly appear in Central City, I think that was an interesting tactic to kind of, you know, again, like, give the Flash some villains to fight in a way that makes sense. So I thought that was interesting. I think that it's not completely logical. It has some holes, like why it's, like, taking so long for them to appear. Like, are they all in comas like Barry was? Why is, you know, how has nobody noticed this yet? Like, why are so many people, like, not believing that there's metahumans running around when there's obviously strange stuff happening all the time? You know, there's some stuff that's not, like, there's some holes in it a bit, but overall I think that's that was a good tactic for them to use to justify having villains for Flash to fight each episode. I will say that I'm a bit confused why they kept reusing Captain Cold multiple times throughout the season when they could have just used some other villain. Like, it's because he's not even a metahuman, so it just seemed weird why they kept repeating this character that's not even a metahuman. Not even that great of a character, in my opinion. I mean, he's not, like, a terrible villain, but it's just, like, I don't know. I thought that they used him a little too much this season, and so I hope that in the future he doesn't come up as much. But yeah, I think besides that, I think the villain situation was pretty good. You know, they were obviously hit or miss, the villains. You know, some of them were really good, some of them weren't. But I think that using the particle accelerator was a good way of having all these villains show up. Then, of course, you have the main villain of the series, Harrison Wells / Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash. So I think he was a very good villain. They kind of set up this weird situation where, you know, in order for his ultimate plan to work, he had to help Barry become the Flash. And so I think that was very interesting, to have this setup where the villain has to help the hero become the hero in order to eventually succeed in his plan. So I thought that was a very interesting thing they set up there. And it's also, you're kind of seeing, like, this weird other situation where you're seeing the villain who is his arch nemesis in the future. And so you're seeing his origin story, and he already has an arch nemesis who he always fights, but he's just becoming the Flash. So I thought that was a very interesting way that they handled this. And I'll get back to him later, because there's a lot more with him. But now I want to talk about Barry and Iris. I thought their relationship was very interesting. I think, you know, I'm not completely sure where they're going with it. If they're trying to do more of, like, a sibling relationship or romantic relationship, where they're trying to go with it. But I think that is very interesting, what they're doing. I will say there's some elements of their relationship that seems a lot like the Oliver-Laurel relationship in Season 1, especially throwing Eddie in there, kind of being the Tommy of Flash. So, I'll explain more about that later, but I want to talk about, just briefly talk about Barry and Joe. I think that's their kind of like father-son relationship was very good. And yeah, I just very much enjoyed that kind of relationship between them. And then time travel. Time travel is all over this series, this season of Flash. I was actually surprised that they, like, used time travel so early in the series. Like, on the one hand, I kind of wish that they saved it for later, that, like, we got more of just, like, you know, Flash just figuring out his powers of just using super speed, and then, like, farther down the line, do more of, like, the time travel, alternate dimension stuff. But at the same time, I think that adding that in later also could have had the potential of hurting it, so I think maybe it was a good idea to throw it in as an integral part of the show from the beginning, so that way, you know, it's always a part of the show instead of just kind of throwing it in there like, oh, time travel. So yeah, so I'm kind of torn on that. I think it's cool. I think, you know, it's very interesting. I kind of wish that they waited till later to do it, but whatever. So our first look at time travel in this show is in episodes 15 and 16, titled Out of Time and Rogue Time, where, you know, Barry goes back, and we pretty much see, like, the same episode, but, like, different versions of the episode. Like, there's stuff set up in the first version of the episode, and then you see, what if this happened a little bit different? What if Cisco actually went to the party? What if they captured Martin earlier? Like, what happens? How does all this change? So I thought that was very interesting. I pretty much immediately knew when Flash was on the way to the morgue and he saw the other version of himself, and then, you know, they focused on the taxi, like the lady who was late getting the taxi. You know, I pretty much figured, oh, they're gonna do like a time travel, time loop kind of thing, because, you know, that's kind of our point of reference, is the lady who's late for work, who's late getting the taxi. So, so that kind of immediately was like, oh, they're gonna do time travel. He's gonna go back to this moment later, and he does. The tidal wave happens. He goes super fast, ends up going back in time to that moment. And so I thought that was very cool. And they also kind of do the cliche, like, when a movie or show is going to, you know, rewrite everything that happened, you know, go back in time, redo everything. And so they kind of do, like, the sort of, like, things that are normally no-nos for the show to do. They do those. They have Barry and Iris kiss. They have Barry reveal to Iris that he's the Flash. And then they have Cisco. He's suspicious of Wells. And then Wells reveals his true plan, his true name, Eobard Thawne. And he, you know, that he's Reverse Flash. And then he kills Cisco. And so, you know, they kind of do all this stuff throughout it that, you know, you can't normally do. And so it is a bit cliche, but it also is cool. And I was also surprised that that whole thing, like, came back up. Like, Cisco still remembered it even after Barry going back in time and erasing that from happening. So I was surprised to see that they went that route, and then they explain, you know, because when they started, like, when they, you know, first introduced that Cisco remembers that event, I was like, really? How does he remember that event? Like, are they going to explain that? And I'm glad that they eventually explained it in the finale, sort of, where Thawne, or Wells, says that Cisco was affected by the particle accelerator explosion also. So I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I'm definitely very excited to find out, you know, how exactly was he affected. Like, you know, yeah, he can remember the alternate timeline, but, like, what's his power that he got exactly? It's gonna be interesting to see where that goes. Also, in that scene, we get this, like, Wells, or Eobard Thawne ends up telling, Cisco that he kind of sees them as having a father-son relationship. I think that's a very interesting relationship. That's kind of, I guess, something that goes through, like, a lot in the show, of having, like, these father-son relationships, like, the non-biological father-son relationships. You have Joe and Barry, you have Harrison Wells / Eobard Thawne and Cisco, and so I thought that was very interesting that they kind of threw that in there. I thought that was nice. And so, now I want to talk about Iris actually finds out that Barry is the Flash this season, which I was very surprised that they did that. I would have thought that they would have waited longer for her to find out, but they did it immediately. Not immediately, but, like, in the first season, they have her find out Barry is the Flash, and, she's kind of mad that, like, he didn't tell her, and that then she finds out that her dad told him not to tell her, and you kind of get this, conflict between her and her father. And Arrow also has a father-daughter conflict, of, somebody, one of them hiding something from each other, and that creates, a break in their relationship, except in Arrow, I'll get to that later, spoiler alert, is between Quentin and Laurel, but in Arrow, it just does not work well, but in Flash, I think that it's really good. I think that they did that successful because it makes a lot of sense here of why she'd be mad, whereas in Arrow, it makes sense, but it's just kind of, I don't know, just kind of annoying, I don't know, it's just weird. I'll get to it later, but I think that the father-daughter conflict in this and The Flash was much better than the one in Arrow. And also, speaking of Flash and Arrow, they do, even though they have, like, the crossover episodes, they do have a few, like, crossover episodes in the, in Flash mostly, where, Arrow characters appear in Flash episodes from time to time. They don't really do that with Arrow, which I would have liked to have seen them do that more often, of Flash characters showing up in Arrow. They kind of only have, like, Barry show up in the finale to save everybody from Ra's al Ghul's castle, and so I think that it would have been nicer if they had kind of had more throughout the Arrow season, had more Flash characters show up, but I think it's cool that they did it a lot in The Flash, of having, Felicity and Ray show up in Central City, then Joe and Cisco go to Starling City, and they meet up with Quentin and Laurel, and so I think that's very cool that they had these kind of, like, crossover episodes that, like, are technically not crossovers, but they're technically crossovers, but they're not, like, calling them crossovers, so, I thought that was cool that they kind of did that from time to time, but now I want to move on to the finale of The Flash, Season 1, and Barry gets the chance to go back in time and save his mother, and clear his father's name, and get the perfect life that he never got, and so I think that was very cool, and especially, like, the way they kind of paid off the end. However, I feel like that with the finale, they, like, especially because, like, they ended where they do, it's just really weird. Like, it seems like they wasted too much time in the episode of having Barry, like, trying to figure out if he wants to take the offer or not, and it's like, I wish that they would have shortened that amount of time to, like, have more time for him going back in time, and, like, actually, like, the cool stuff, actually having him go back in time, actually having him fighting, Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash, actually taking care of the, you know, uh, you know, the singularity that happens at the end, instead of, like, leaving that cliffhanger of him running into it, and then it ends, and you gotta wait till season 2. And so I think that, I would have enjoyed it better. Maybe it was, like, a time thing, like, that is, like, a lot of, like, you know, visual effects, CGI and stuff for a TV show, and so maybe it's, like, they needed that extra time that they couldn't, you know, they couldn't have the big singularity thing happen at the end of the episode. They just needed to do it a little bit and then save it for, you know, season 2 a few months later. But I just think that it would have been a better, like, a better ending to the season if they hadn't wasted so much time with this Flash, like, with Barry just kind of being like, I don't know, should I do it? Should I not do it? What should I do? Can I do it? Can I even go fast enough? Like, I wish they just kind of went right to it and, you know, had everything in that episode. But it's fine. I think that they did a good job. I think that the payoff where he goes back in time and doesn't end up saving his mother because his future self that's there tells him not to, and so you know, he makes that sacrifice to you know, just still be able to live his life that he lives with Joe and Iris, and not change the timeline. So I think that was very cool. That was a good, like, heroic moment for Barry, a good selfless moment. And then the moment when he comes back through the wormhole and punches the Reverse Flash, I think that was so cool. I think that was a very epic moment. And then you get this battle between the Flash and the Reverse Flash, and you get to this moment where Eddie shoots himself. So Eddie, his last name is Eddie Thawne. His last name is Thawne. Like Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash. And so we find out Eddie is the great-great-great-grandfather, I don't know if that's the right amount of greats, but he is distant relative of Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash. And so if when he kills himself, he, you know, through time travel logic, the Reverse Flash ceases to exist. And I think that was a very cool moment for, you know, for him to end as the hero, for him to be the one to beat the villain. It definitely confirmed my suspicions that, you know, this was basically the Oliver, Laurel, Tommy love triangle from Arrow Season 1, just with Barry, Iris, and Eddie. But, you know, it was still cool. It was still, you know, I think that made sense for where they were going, what they had set up. It made sense for him to die, but I think it very much did seem like they were kind of just copying what they did in Arrow Season 1 with Oliver, Laurel, and Tommy. Like, pretty much if you look throughout the entire season, there's pretty much the exact same story beats throughout it that are from Arrow Season 1. So, even though it does seem like it's copy, I think it was a really cool moment, really cool. You know, it's kind of a different reason for Eddie to die than Tommy. You know, Tommy dies saving Laurel, Eddie dies saving everybody, but saving, you know, killing himself to kill the villain. Whereas in Arrow Season 1, Oliver beats the villain, sort of. Even though he comes back later, Malcolm Merlyn, but, you know, you have to get the point. And so, I think it was cool. I think that having Eddie be the hero, be the one who beats the Reverse Flash was a very cool moment for his character. And it also, you know, it also makes it so Barry and Iris can get together at some point without Eddie having to be involved. So yeah, I think that they did a good job with having Eddie sacrifice himself at the end. So anyway, I think that that's all I want to talk about with Flash Season 1, and now I want to get into Arrow Season 3. I just want to quickly talk about the flashback storyline. I didn't think it was that interesting this season. I think that the other 2 seasons had more interesting storylines for the flashbacks. I think that this one was kind of, it's alright. Having him in Hong Kong was kind of interesting. I think that the most interesting part of the flashbacks is when he went back to Starling City. At first, when they first showed the Starling City sign, I was like, really? They're having him go back to Starling? Really? But it actually ended up being a very interesting plot line of, like, you know, showing how all the characters there are, how they, you know, where they were at 2 years prior to Season 1, giving some kind of setup for Season 1 of Arrow, and clarifying some of the things that, you know, weren't really explained in the first season, some of kind of just the weird little details that, you know, kind of filling in the gaps, you know, like how Oliver got the book, how he knew, well, not how he got the book, we know how he got the book, but like explaining how he knew, you know, what was in the book, like what the book meant. And so, also in that episode where the flashback takes place in Starling City, the present day stuff takes place on the island, which I thought was very interesting to have that kind of, you know, that kind of flip on the normal flashback style of having the present day in Starling and the flashback on the island. I thought that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool to see, you know, the kind of switch up. Also get the return of Slade Wilson in that episode. I thought that was very interesting. I think Slade Wilson is a great villain, so it's cool to see him back. But yeah, I think that focusing more on the flashback plot line, I think that having him in Starling City, I think that worked fairly well. There's still some kind of problematic things of, like, he was in Starling City and nobody saw him, but it's fine. You kind of just have to, you know, kind of say whatever about that. They still, I think, successfully did what they were trying to do, and I think it worked pretty well. But now, let's get into the sort of main present-day plot line, starting with Oliver and Felicity. That's a big part of this season, is their relationship, their now romantic relationship. I do have to say, I wasn't completely on board with it at first. It did start to grow on me, and I actually do think that they're kind of a cute couple now. Even though it does seem a bit weird why they were going so heavily with Oliver and Laurel in the first season, and now we're doing Oliver and Felicity now, but it's fine. I like them as a couple. I think that the ending of the season, having Oliver retire and go live his life with Felicity, I thought that was good. I think that was a good ending, even though it's not the ending, kind of like, sort of like an Iron Man 3 kind of thing. You know, Iron Man 3 ends with Tony Stark retiring, and then Age of Ultron, he's back there, still being Iron Man. So, if this was actually the finale of the series, I think that I would have liked it a bit better, but knowing that there's 5 more seasons to the show, it's kind of just like, why did you go that route with it? But, you know, now you have to explain why he comes back as the Arrow later, and I don't know. I like the ending, though. I think that, you know, overall, it's pretty good. It's fine. Just a weird choice. Maybe they didn't know they were going to continue with it, but it's kind of a weird choice, knowing that there's 5 more seasons. And so now, I'm going to talk about the big moment that pretty much sets off the entire season, which is Sarah's death. And yeah, I think that was a weird choice. I kind of understand seeing, like, the entire season, why they kind of did that. You know, it's kind of to get, Quentin, you know, kind of a way to get Quentin mad at Team Arrow, because they hide the fact that Sarah is dead from him because of his heart condition. They don't want him to have a heart attack or something, because he finds out Sarah's dead. terrible reaction, terrible decision to not tell him. Like, I don't know. I don't get what they were doing with that. Like, that was just so weird to just, like, actively lie, actively do things to make him think that Sarah is still alive. That was just really, really weird. It was also kind of a way to get Laurel to become the Black Canary, which I'm totally on board with either. You know, I think it's not a terrible decision. I think that, as it went on, got a little bit better, but just, like, the first few episodes of her being the Black Canary, it just seemed like they kept repeating the same exact thing of, like, oh, she goes after somebody, and she ends up getting attacked, she ends up failing, and somebody else has to come in and save her. And then they tell her, what were you thinking? Why did you go out there alone? And she does it again. And she does it again. And it just seemed really annoying that they were, like, continuing that same exact plotline, sort of like the Oliver's pessimism about defeating Slade Wilson at the end of last season. It seemed like they were repeating the same thing of Laurel goes out, fails to defeat the villain, somebody else has to save her, they yell at her, like, why did you go out there? And yeah, so, that was just, yeah, it was really repetitive, really annoying, just like she failed every single time, which was just like, why? Like, at least if you're gonna have her be a hero, like, have her be a hero, not have her fail every single time she tries something. I like the idea of Laurel being a hero, but at the same time, the way they did it was just very weird. Now, I'm going to talk about Ray Palmer, our new character introduced in this season, played by the Superman actor from Superman Returns. So I thought that was very interesting kind of Easter egg there, you know, having this actor play a DC hero before playing a completely different DC hero, and here, and so, at first I wasn't totally on board with him, and actually thought he was going to be, like, the villain of the season, but he ended up starting to grow on me. His relationship with Felicity started to grow on me. I like how he's basically a male version of Felicity. Actually, he's kind of a mix of Felicity and Oliver, because he kind of has, like, the awkwardness of Felicity, but with, like, the, you know, heroic nature of Oliver. So it's kind of interesting to see, like, his character kind of being a mix of them, and I think he ended up being a very interesting character as the season went on, and he started to build his Atom suit, which is basically an Iron Man suit, and yeah, I think that he's a pretty good character. I enjoyed him. And then, we got a return of Malcolm Merlyn, and they used him very interestingly in this season. I'm not sure if it was good or bad, the way they used him, but it was very interesting of having him really have this genuine love for Thea, but at the same time having him do things like drugging Thea to make her kill Sarah so he can have Oliver fight Ra's al Ghul and kill Ra's al Ghul so Oliver can become Ra's al Ghul and he can not have the death sentence on him from League of Assassins. And so, you can tell he's trying to be a better person, but also not really, and he also becomes, Oliver lets him be Ra's al Ghul at the end of it. It's weird. I think that they used him interestingly. I just don't know how I feel about it. But speaking of that, let's talk about Thea. It's cool to see her now kind of getting in on the action, finishing off the season, becoming the Red Arrow. And I really like that when Oliver revealed to her that he's the Arrow, she didn't overreact about it. Like in a negative way. Like, she actually was happy that it was him, and she was proud of him and stuff. I thought that was cool. Because I always expected, if she ever found out, she would have this crazy overreaction of, like, how could you never tell me this? And it was very cool, very kind of refreshing to see, you know, in this show where characters frequently overreact to things, react the complete wrong way to pretty much everything, and have somebody react the right way to something. It was nice. So, I just want to point that out. I actually very much enjoyed that, that they went that route with it. And it's also cool seeing just her relationship with Oliver, their sibling relationship, their, you know, now that she knows that Oliver's the Arrow, you know, he doesn't have to hide stuff from her, they could just talk about just everything, just opened. I thought that was very nice. I always assumed that if she found out Oliver was the Arrow, that would, you know, and even Diggle said this throughout the season before he told her that, like, you're gonna lose her forever if you tell her this. But it's cool that, like, that actually strengthened their relationship. I really enjoyed that. That's one thing I really enjoyed about this season, is just their relationship. And then with Thea, you kind of have to talk about Roy. I'm not really sure where they're going with Roy. Fakes his own death, goes off the grid, gives Thea his red hood for her to become the Red Arrow. Not sure where they're going with him. Hopefully he comes back later because he's a very interesting character, and especially with his relationship with Thea. I'm hoping that they find a way to bring him back into the mix. That's all I kind of have to say about Roy in this season. But now, let's move on to Oliver's death. So, Oliver has to go up against Ra's al Ghul to, you know, because he has to lie and tell him that he's the one who killed Sarah to protect Thea, because Thea is actually the one who killed Sarah, technically. And so, he has to go up against Ra's al Ghul, and he ends up failing, he ends up dying, he ends up getting a wound that he very much should have died from, and falling off a cliff that his fall he very much should have died from, but we get Maceo's wife, I do not remember her name, but, she ends up healing him. They give this explanation that is kind of weak, kind of like, really? Like, I don't know, it just, I wish that they didn't go the route of, like, killing Oliver, and then just having to figure out a way to bring him back to life, but I think it worked best, in just kind of the effect it had on the people back in Starling City. You know, I think that this season very much focused on, you know, just like the intro for this season where he said, others have joined my crusade. It's very much focusing on the other people of Team Arrow, of like, you know, especially when he dies, you know, you see them have to figure out, why are they doing this? Why are they, you know, going out, stopping crime, doing all this stuff? Because is it just for Oliver? Or is there another reason that they're doing this? And they have to all figure out what's their reason. I think that was very interesting, and then also setting up the end of the season where Oliver decides to retire and leave all of them to continue, you know, continue vigilanteing. That aspect of it was cool, of having Oliver die. That aspect was good. Having him figure out, you know, having to figure out a way for them to bring him back to life wasn't really that good. I think that whole thing just, I think that was kind of weird. But we go further into the season, and Ra's al Ghul ends up wanting Oliver to become the next leader of the League of Assassins, the next Ra's al Ghul, and he's resisting it at first, but then eventually things happen. Ra's al Ghul kind of kills Thea, and the only way to bring her back to life is by joining the League of Assassins and becoming the next Ra's al Ghul. And so, I will say, I don't think that they did a good job at setting up why Oliver joining the League of Assassins was so, like, why Oliver becoming the next Ra's al Ghul was so bad, besides the fact that, it's the League of Assassins, but it's like, but if he becomes the leader of the League of Assassins, couldn't he, like, say, alright, maybe we'll change the name, we won't be the League of Assassins anymore, we'll be, the League of Justice, I believe that's taken. Just rename it, just change the whole way it works, say, alright, we're not gonna be based here in Nanda Parbat, or whatever it was called, we'll go to Starling, we'll be in Starling, or just, we'll spread around the world, and we'll just be this league that's all across the world, and protecting people. I feel like that they didn't explain, like, that's not how it works. Like, obviously, when he gets there, you see, like, oh, he, like, starts to, like, make him have to lose his old life, and, get a new name, and, shed his past and everything, and so, sure to see, alright, okay, yeah, this was bad, but they didn't explain all that at first, and so, to me, I was just like, for me, I was just kind of just like, why can't he just say, alright, I'll be Ra's al Ghul, and then just change everything, and say, alright, we're not the League of Assassins anymore, we're done, like, I don't know, it seemed like they needed to have set up more of, like, why Oliver doing this was such a bad thing. But yeah, so, eventually, he has to join the League of Assassins, he becomes Sah-Him, and, we obviously find out that, he was kind of just being a double agent, he was making Ra's al Ghul think that, he was loyal to him, but he actually wasn't. However, he does cross a bit too many lines, and I understand, like, that's kind of what he had to do, but it's just like, he takes Lila, Diggle's wife, and, he ends up, like, breaking this brotherly bond between, him and Diggle, which I think that was very interesting thing they, like, had before, this happened, was, like, showing in this season, like, the brotherly bond that Oliver and Diggle had. I thought that was very cool, but just going back to Oliver as Sah-Him, yeah, he really just crossed a few too many lines, and it's just like, it's like, really, dude? Like, just, like, are we supposed to be rooting for him? Like, I mean, I see, even before this, like, again, hiding the fact that Sarah was dead, hiding that from Quentin, like, just, like, it kind of made it hard for me to be like, no, yeah, Team Arrow, like, no, you guys did, you made terrible choices. You did the complete wrong thing multiple times throughout this season. But it had Oliver cross a few too many lines as Sah-Him for him to really just say, oh, no, I was faking it the whole time. So, yeah, that was a bit weird. But obviously, he reveals it, and we get to the finale, and I'll say the finale was disappointing. It was a bit disappointing. I think they needed to have broken it up into 2 parts. I think that both Flash and Arrow had kind of problems with their finales. I feel like neither of them, really stuck the landing as well as I wanted them to. I think Flash did it much better, even though they had the weird cliffhanger at the end. I feel like they needed to have broken it up into 2 parts. I mean, yeah, they kind of did, with the first part taking place in Nanda Parbat and second in Starling City, but they needed to have 2 episodes in Starling City, with Oliver revealing himself to be, not loyal to the League of Assassins, still Oliver Queen. I think that just having 1 episode to have that all in there just didn't work that well. I think that the battle between Oliver and Ra's al Ghul, I think it went too quick. I think I would have enjoyed if they went more, they let it drag out for longer. I think that they just kind of had it end too quick, It just kind of like, I think they also need to have, like, set up something for, like, why this time when he's fighting Ra's al Ghul was different. Like, yeah, of course, he was trained, League of Assassins, he wasn't before, but, like, they need to have had something specific, like a move that Ra's al Ghul taught him that he now used against him. Like, I think they need to have something like that to make it this, like, the victory so much better than just, yeah, goes there, they fight, he beats him. So yeah, I think that they need to have a little bit more there. And then, as I mentioned earlier, they go on the rest of the episode, they set up Oliver retiring from being the Arrow, leaving the rest of the team to continue saving the city, and seeming like a very good ending to the story, but it has 5 more seasons left. So thought that was kind of weird again. But I think that my main problem with this season is that the writers, it seems like they didn't know whose side they wanted the audience to be on, and so they made it so you're not on anybody's side for any of it. Like, you're just like, okay, we're on Team Arrow's side. However, they're crossing a few lines here or there. They're not telling Quentin that Sarah's dead. And then you're like, okay, maybe we're on Quentin's side. But then you're like, oh, but he's trying to reveal that Oliver is the Arrow. You know, I mean, I understand why he's mad, but, like, you can't be on the guy's side who's trying to, you know, ruin Oliver's secret identity. And then it's like, obviously you're not on Ra's al Ghul's side, or League of Assassins' side. And so it's just like, it's just so weird, the whole thing. I feel like you weren't on anybody's side, really, for the season, and it was just really weird. Also, like I said before, they needed to have, really, like, set the stakes for, like, why Oliver joining League of Assassins and becoming the next Ra's al Ghul was such a bad thing, and instead of, you know, like, from the beginning, explain that, so that way you're just not, like, I feel like I'm just kind of confused on, like, why he's, like, why he's resisting so much. It's like, just do it. I don't know. I feel like that this season didn't work as well as the other two, but I still enjoyed a lot of it. I enjoyed The Flash a lot more, but I still enjoyed this, and I'm very excited to see what happens in the future of both Arrow and Flash, and the rest of the Arrowverse, which actually I think that for now I'm gonna stick to Arrow, Flash, and maybe Supergirl. I know there's like DC Legend of Tomorrow and Black Lightning and some other stuff, so if you want me to watch those, please comment below which shows in the Arrowverse you want me to watch, what do you want my thoughts on. Otherwise, I'll probably just stick to Arrow, Flash, and I think Supergirl. But yeah, so again, comment below what do you want me to watch, and also your thoughts on the video and of Arrow Season 3 and Flash Season 1. And if you like the video, please remember to give it a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and maybe check out some of my other videos. You can click here to watch me talk about the first 2 seasons of Arrow, and here's a video that YouTube recommends for you. With that said, that's a wrap.